to the Bean Path, to Nasli, to Tamika, Miranda, for inviting me and having me here today. Um, so yeah, my name is William Hill. I'm known to MJ as Mo to most. I am a native of Mississippi, born and raised in State Line, Mississippi. And I went to Mississippi State for undergrad and grad school, both degrees in computer science. And as far as what I do, I started my career working in the government space. So once I finished my master's degree in Mississippi State, I moved to the Bay Area and worked at Lawrence Livermore National Lab for about 7.5 years, where I worked in various job functions there, primarily as a excuse me, full stack engineer, writing tools for government, subject matter experts in the government. So I spent the majority of my time there working and writing tools for climate scientists. So
Mm.
was doing really, really cool work there. And then I moved to a company called New Relic, where I was working more in the enterprise space, where was writing front end tools for telemetry data, basically allowing companies to monitor their services and web traffic. And now I work at a startup called Meroxa that is a data engineering company that it makes it easy to write data pipelines. So essentially, I've spent a lot of my career working, with government agencies and working with data and basically trying to understand data and synthesize and visualize it to make it easy to work with.
Wow. So first of all, I'm gonna start from the top. So people call me MJ as well. My initials. So that's already we starting off on a good foot. The second thing is that's so interesting that you're talking about that this one is talking about how to stream data and understanding how to utilize and use AI to help with that. Because as running a nonprofit, as the data, your information, the results, like having quantifiable results is what gets you the money, right? What gets you access, and people want to know what is actually being done. And most people who run businesses, being able to show results, like proof of concept, proof of your product. And so how do you use these AI tools to help to leverage that? So I really want to get into it. I love the background. I love you have Mississippi roots. And I really want to get to the meat because we have so many small business owners in here that are, I think, dipping their toe into the AI space, but could really use some guidance on how to use it. As I started using things like Chat GPT, I found that even my friends that know about Chat GPT, they're still using it in the most surface way.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remembered recently I was sitting in the office with a friend of mine who's in business, and I put in a prompt that was a real lengthy prompt.
Mm-hmm.
It was like I was just brain dumping all the things. I told it how I wanted to do it, what I wanted to feel. And I just remember them going, "Oh, you can use it like that?" So I think it's really interesting today that we're going to talk and explore how to use the AI agent workflow to help us to get better solutions around our data. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to you. Do you need access to the screen for your PowerPoint? I'm sure you do.
Yes,
Perfect.
I do.
All right. So you should now have access to the screen to do your PowerPoint. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I hand it over to Will.
All right. And again, thank you, Miranda. So yeah, I'm gonna jump into the presentation. So I will say we will get into the weeds a little bit technically. But I'll try to keep it high level because I know we have a mixed crowd here. But yeah, I do want to get into, some information that I hope will be useful to everyone that's here in one way or another. So I'll start to present. And again, I'll try to be conscious of time and such. So yeah, we'll get right into it. So, as Miranda mentioned, we're going to be talking about AI agents and how you can create your own personal research team using AI agents. So, as I did mention, I am going to jump into some code here. I'm not going to live code it. I've already have the code written, so we're just going to, kind of walk through it, talk through it, and see how it works. So, but if you do want access to the code, it's on GitHub. It's publicly available. If you follow this link, bit.ly/AI agents bean path, you can get access to the code that we're going to look at. And don't worry if you don't, get a chance to copy it right now. I'll make sure to make it available afterwards. So our outline is first, we're going to talk a little bit about the rise of generative AI. We're going to look at then a little bit under the hood as far as what large language models are. Then we'll get into what AI agents are. We'll look at a particular methodology of using AI agents called mixture of agents. And then we'll actually look at a real code example of using mixture of agents, using the Crew AI framework to write that, and then we can open it up for some Q&A. So it's kind of like Miranda was talking about in the intro, right? Is that ChatGPT is really starting to enter the mainstream. But I think even some people still may not know exactly like the power of it, of like what you can really do with it. But it has signaled this paradigm shift as far as like how people view and interact with AI. I think a lot of people fall into one or two camps where some people see like, oh, this is amazing. Like I can really augment my work, my productivity, my workflow, really use it to enhance what I already do. And then there's some other people who are like, oh no, this, is man, this is so crazy. This might replace like my job. Like honestly, even as a software engineer, I had a little bit of that at some point where I was like, man, this thing could do what I do and it never gets tired and all this type of stuff. So, and I think both schools of thought has some validity. But the fact of the matter is, generative AI is here to stay. It's only becoming more pervasive as more and more research is like coming out on a weekly basis. There's more and more money being pumped into the research to make it better. Hopefully, more and more money pumped into the ethics around it as well. But I think, given that it is here to stay, the best thing to do, at least in my opinion, is to embrace it and see how you can actually use it to gain an edge and remain competitive in what it is that you do. So I think the next frontier in generative AI is personalized generative AI. Things like ChatGPT, Claude, Cohere, all these commercially available tools that you can use for generative AI. They're more so general purpose around like content generation, text generation, and stuff like that. You even have those other ones, Mid-Journey, that's doing like image generation and so have you. But they're all, excuse me, pretty general. So I think the next frontier is actually how can we take these generative AI models and tools and use them for our own like personal uses, whether it's personalizing it on our data or whether that's as an individual or as someone who's running a company, how you can you use it with like your own internal documents, your own internal data, how can you use that to make your operations better? Because the thing is, especially I know I had this moment whenever I first used like ChatGPT, it felt like magic. Like I typed in something, it was different from like going to Google and searching, right? It was like I typed in natural language, what it is that I wanted to accomplish, and it gave it back to me in natural language like it was an expert. And it's just like this wow moment. But it's not magic, it's just data. So it's like we all have data. So like how can we now take our data and get the benefits of generative AI in an efficient way, but also a responsible way? So we're going to take a look at some open source tools today of how we can do that and some methodologies of how we can do that. So we're going to start to look at AI agents and how we can build our own research team to obtain, analyze, and summarize some data. So, but before we do that, let's look a little bit under the hood at the underlying technology that powers most of the generative AI tools that we know about right now. And that's called a large language model. A large language model is essentially a deep neural network that is trained on an incredibly large amount of data using incredibly powerful computer systems. So most of these models that we know, again, like ChatGPT and so on and so forth, like the GPT 4.0, was trained on supercomputers that was using a huge amount of data, like petabytes of data, of text data, that's and then also trained using very, very powerful GPUs. So GPUs are graphical processing units. They were primarily used like in gaming and graphics processing, but they're actually really, really good at crunching numbers, basically doing the matrix multiplication that you need for artificial intelligence and machine learning. That's why if you've been following the stock market or stuff or anything, like Nvidia, the company that has the most and the best GPUs right there, they become one of the most valuable companies in history right now because the saying is everyone digging for gold sell shovels, and Nvidia has the best shovels right now. So does this wave of AI advancement has basically shot Nvidia to become one of the most valuable companies in history. Um, so one of the things when you're doing this in-depth training and learning of these models it's trying to learn like the nuances of grammar, context, and semantics so that it can actually understand natural language that you're giving it and respond back to you in natural language. So these large language models are revolutionizing the fields in conversational AI, content generation, text analysis, and even the multimodal LLMs are starting to do things in like image generation and video generation. So there's advancements that's happening really on a weekly basis. So now that we know a little bit about the underlying technology, let's think about some or talk about how we can use that technology for our different benefits as we start to get into like this personalization that we want to be able to use large language models for. And one approach to that is using AI agents. So AI agents are autonomous software entities that can perceive their environments, make decisions, and take actions on specific goals. But one of the real key with these AI agents is that you can give them a specific role and then they can collaborate amongst each other toward trying to solve a common goal. And we're going to start to look at how a architecture amongst AI agents work as they do their specific task and then can collaborate and delegate to other agents within that environment. So why would we use these AI agents? Well, one we already talked about a little bit is that they can collaborate with one another. They also can process vast amount of data very quickly because you can give them a very, very specific role. As we talked about like ChatGPT and so on and so forth, they're very general. In this case, you can take an agent. It's like, hey, agent, your specific role is to do this one thing. That way, it can narrow its focus and try to be, work the best it can at that one specific thing. So you can start to specialize it or personalize it to a specific task. And you can do that with each agent throughout the environment. So then they become like a specialist that you can, feed it new data and so on and so forth. And it becomes specialized in this one task, almost, learning as an expert level, and then start to collaborate with the other agents. So what we're going to do, as we mentioned, trying to build a research team, we can look at how we can give each agent a role in a particular research project. So they can do things like data collection, analysis, and then literature review. And so this is a outline of what I just mentioned. So we're going to have this AI agents research team, and we want to give each agent a specific role and task within this research project. So in this case, we can have a researcher who can go out and obtain different data sources, different data, whether it's journal information or what have you. And then you want to have a data analyst that, with all the different pieces of data that we have, being able to analyze it, synthesize it, get the key points out of it that's relevant to the research that we're trying to perform. Then you can have a technical writer that takes that information from the data analyst and writes an article. And then you can have a reviewer that you can pass that article to that can then basically be like a peer reviewer to check for any inconsistencies or any improvement that can be made to the particular article. So this is a diagram of how this particular flow can work, where, excuse me, it lays out exactly what we talked about in the previous slide, where we can have the researcher. The researcher's job is to go out and obtain data. Again, whether that's from the internet, whether that's from a database you already have, or whatever. It can support different methods of obtaining the data that it needs. Then it can pass it to the data analyst. So this will then analyze that data, according to the task, according to the hypothesis that you have with your particular research project. It can then try to pull out the relevant data that it needs to perform its analysis. And then from there, it passes it to the technical writer. Again, it writes the article according to the data that was analyzed. Then we can pass it to a reviewer. And then that reviewer will then end the process, which should hopefully end in a well-written document according to the research project. So it's entirely possible to write a list of like a AI agent framework just using one LLM back in it, because in this case, the agents are using a large language model to help perform their task. So essentially, it's going out getting the getting the data, passing it to the large language models to do whatever his task is defined, and then moving that data to the next step. But as we mentioned, a lot of these large language models out here are very general. And one of the limitations of large language models is that, yes, they're trained on a large amount of data, but they still only know about the data that they're trained on. So you eventually can reach the edge of their knowledge. Let's say even if we were using one of the most powerful models out there right now, which is Claude's 3.5 Sonnet, it still does not know about the most current events. I can't, for the most part, because Claude, I think with 3.5 Sonnet, it can't go and search the internet. I can ask it about something that happened last week, and it won't know. It can do something that's called hallucination, where it could try to very confidently give you an answer that's beyond the edge of its training data, but that's unreliable and inaccurate. So one of the things that we can do is, since we know that different LLMs are for the most part are trained on different data sets and trained in a different way, we can start to try to combine the different LLMs to basically take the best pieces of each one of them, or the things that they're work best at, and use those to augment our agents. So essentially, if we have an agent that's more specialized in like scientific research, well, we want to use that for our agent that's going to obtain the data. If we have an agent that's more specialized on processing data, processing numerical data or whatever data we're processing, then we want to use that LLM for that particular agent. So we can start to create, as we see, this mixture of agents methodology. So it's going to perform similar, or it's going to look mostly similar to that previous diagram that we saw, but we were going to actually change it up just a little bit. So in this case, we see it's mostly the same. The researcher is still the same. The data analyst is still the same. But where we see the difference with the mixture of agents is that in this case, instead of just having one technical writer, we have 3 different technical writers. And each one of these technical writers are using a different large language model. And what that's going to allow us to do is essentially we get 3 different viewpoints of the data that we attain. So each one of these technical writers, again, backed by a different large language model, is going to write their own article according to how they interpret that data. So then each one of these will pass the article that they wrote to that reviewer agent, and then that reviewer can take those 3 articles and try to synthesize the best parts of each of the 3 articles, and then try to give a even better final article, if that makes sense. So, and what we're going to do, this is the methodology we're going to implement in the code that we'll get to in just a moment. And what we're going to do, what we're going to use to write that code is an open source tool called Crew AI. So Crew AI is an open source Python framework that makes it really easy to create AI agent systems. So whenever you're creating the AI agents, you're able to define their different roles and then assign different tasks to them. So it, excuse me, it really facilitates that inter-agent communication. So the different steps we need to perform to build those agents with Crew AI is, first we need to find the agent role, just like we saw in the diagram. So, a data analyst, a writer, technical reviewer, so on and so forth. And then one of the cool things about Crew AI is that you can augment each of those agents with tools that they need to complete their task. So, and we'll see that as we jump into the code. So in this case, say like the researcher, it may need to be able to go out and research something from the internet. We can write either one, Crew AI provides tools natively in their framework that's already written for you, or you can write your own tools. So in this case, we're going to see that when we get to jump into the code in a moment, that our researcher is going to need a tool to be able to go out to the internet and search for data. Because if we were to ask it to research the particular topic we're going to look at, it's not going to know about it, because we're basically going to ask it about a current event, which is going to be outside the scope of the large language model that was trained on. So we need to provide it a tool to augment its abilities to go and get new data. And then we can specify the agent task, and then we kick off the crew, which will then everyone will start to work together. All right. So I know that was a lot. Hopefully I was able to kind of, explain it very clearly. but now we can jump into the code that's at that link that I provided earlier, and we can start to look at how we can write these agents. So give me a second to uh, change the share on my screen.
So Will, while you're doing that, I just want to there's a chat going on in the chat just for clarity. And I just want to kind of bring those questions to the forefront while you're doing that.
Okay.
So one of the questions was, is he saying, and they confirmed it, but I just want to make sure, is he saying different AI agents or people? And it's confirmed you're saying agents equals the role or performer, correct? I think function.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, good. Okay, I just wanted to make sure you bring a little clarity to that. And then they were saying that the agents are like computer humans. I think that is a very interesting way to describe that. I love that. They perform tasks that instruct them to perform. So Frederick Burns brought that term up to life. And I just wanted to just, if you had any clarity or just wanted to reiterate some of the things that maybe was being said. They said they didn't know it was a methodology. Curtis said it was just making the rewrite and adjusting everything. This looks like you can build a process and keep doing it manually. And so just if you want to speak to that, that would be great.
Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Sure. So it was kind of a layer, I mean, a hidden question, but he just said, I just did this. Once he got clarity about the human agent part, right?
Mhm.
He said, I just did this on POE, but didn't know it was a methodology. I was just making a rewrite and adjust everything. This looks like you can build a process and then keep doing it manually.
Um,
Or he said, I keep doing it manually. And I'm not sure if there might be some words missing in the translation of that, but there.
okay. Yeah, I'll probably have to go back and look, and maybe me and him we can like once I open up the Q&A, we can kind of like discuss it that way. So maybe I didn't completely follow the question, but also as we walk through the code, hopefully it'll become more clear how this works. So I'll definitely circle back to that.
Sounds good. And I'll just encourage anybody, and also specifically this gentleman too, if you can re-ask the question in a concise way, and we can pull those questions towards the end. But just a reminder for anybody who has questions, drop them in the chat, and we'll do the Q&A towards the end. Very good. Go ahead, Will.
Okay. So yeah, we'll go through the code now. Like I said, I already have it written. Not gonna live code it just because that would take too much time. But it's not a super long script or anything like that. But we are using Crew AI. And then if someone wants to use this, if you download the repo, I have a README that walks through the different steps to set it up and to run the code. But what we'll just do now is actually walk through the code. So one of the tools that I hadn't mentioned in the slides, but it's key to using it here is this tool called Grock. So Grock is an online service for fast AI inference. So inference essentially being able to feed it new data and trying to basically infer things from that data. It's so essentially like ChatGPT and stuff. But one of the cool things that about Grock is that once you sign up, excuse me, and to get an API key, is that you get access to several different models that you can use via Grock. So, I mean, similar to like ChatGPT, right? Like depending on if you have a paid account or whatever, you get access to different models, whether that's GPT 4.0, GPT 3.5, Turbo, whatever, what have you. So in this case, for our mixture of agents, we're going to use several different models that we're going to be able to access via Grock. So we're going to use the Llama model, both the 70 billion parameter and the 8 billion parameter. These are models that was written by Meta. We're going to use the Gemma 2 model, which is a model written by Meta, and then we're also going to use the Mixtral model. So we first need to set that up. And I have that in the README that you need to go to Grock, sign up, get an API key, so that it just makes it easy. Like one other way that you can do, you can actually run these models locally using a tool called Ollama. It does take a while to download Ollama, but you can actually run these just locally on your computer where you don't need an API key to go out and access those that way. So you can do it a couple different ways. But Grock just makes it easy for the purposes of this particular talk. So now what we're going to do, first off, I'm going to describe what we're trying to accomplish. we want to be able to build a Major League Baseball game recap service. So we want to say like, hey, what happened in the Atlanta Braves game that they played yesterday? And this service, this mixture of agents architecture will go out, find the stats from, like, if the Atlanta Braves actually played a game yesterday, they'll find the stats from that game. They'll then analyze the stats, both the pitching stats and the batting stats. Then we will have three different writers to write recaps of the game, and then we'll pass that recap to an editor, and the editor will give us a final output to say like, hey, this is what happened in the Atlanta Braves game for a given date. So that's the overall research project that we're trying to do. Again, excuse me, you can look at just a similar flow. We can apply this to other different research projects, but this is one I think gives a really good example of how the different agents can work together and also how the agents can use tools to accomplish their task. So let's jump right into the explanation. We'll go through each agent one by one. And again, I'll try to keep a conscious, try to be conscious of time so I can leave time for Q&A. So first off, we define our researcher agent. So this is the first agent that we saw in the diagram, right? So we have this agent function, which comes from Crew AI, and we give this agent all the information it needs to do its job. First, we define which large language model it should use. We're letting it use the Llama 70 billion parameter model. We give it a role, which is MLB researcher. We give it a goal, which is to identify info for a given Major League Baseball game related to a user prompt. So in this case, the user is gonna type in which game they want the info about. And this part is important. Returning the exact results of the get info tool. So as I mentioned, they're like, even if we're using the Llama 70 billion parameter model, which is a huge model trained on a ridiculous amount of data, it does not know about something that happened this week or last week. So we need to augment this model with a tool to be able to go and get more recent data. So we'll see that in just a second. So the backstory is that you're an MLB researcher that identifies games for statisticians to analyze stats from. And this is where we get to that tool to augment this agent's ability, is that we have this get game info tool. And we can go over to this tools tab is where we define that. Essentially, this tool is just a Python function, and it's using the MLB stats API. And this is just a Python wrapper to the MLB stats website where you can go and query stats for any game. Like MLB, they were probably the first sports league that really embraced sports analytics and data analytics. So they have just a treasure trove of stats for each game available on that website. So it's using a Python library to go out and query that. So in this case, this get game info, it takes in a day of a game and a team, and it tries to go out and search for the game info given if a team played on that particular day. And it gives you back the game ID, which is going to be very important, the home team, how many runs they scored, the away team, how many runs they scored, who won, and if they're playing a series of games, what's the series status. So it gives back the data in this very structured format that we'll be able to use. So this is a tool that we're using to augment our researcher, which otherwise it wouldn't be able to go and get accurate information. And then we put this verbose true, which we'll see that once we actually run it. But basically, we'll be able to see the agent think, quote unquote, think in real time by setting that verbose to true. So then we have then we have this statistician agent. This, and again, I'll try to, not word vomit y'all to death with this, but it's similar. We have we pass through the agent function. We're also using the Llama 70B model. It has a role of statistician, and its role is to retrieve players' batting and pitching stats for the game identified by the researcher. So this is also key. It has to operate on the data that's coming from the agent in the previous step. So this is where the collaboration part comes in. So, and we give it its backstory. The statistician is analyzing the player's stats for the relevant game, and then it has its set of tools. So these tools are getting the batting stats and the pitching stats. And we can go back to the tools And this is how it all starts to tie together, right? Because when we found that game info, part of the relevant data was the game ID. We need that game ID to get the batting stats and to get the pitching stats. So these tools are then being used by our statistician agent to say, like, all right, the game that we found in that previous step, let's now go get the box score, and even want to get the box score for the away batters and for the home batters. And then we're using another really cool, very popular Python library called Pandas to put this into a data frame that's going to make the data in a nice format that's easy to parse and analyze. And we're doing the same thing with the pitching stats. So now that we have gone and obtained our data, and then we now have gone and basically separate our data into different tables that we need. So we have the batting stats and the pitching stats. We now want to pass that to our writer agents. And we define 3 different writer agents, just like we saw in that diagram. We have the writer that's the MLB llama writer, the Gemma writer, and the mixture writer. And as you would imagine, each one of those corresponds to the large language model that it's using. So this one's using the llama 8 billion parameter. This is using Gemma 2, and this is using mixture. And each one of them are going to have the same role. They're all MLB writers. And they also have the same goal, which is to write a detailed game recap, provided the game's information and stats. And they all have the same backstory. So we see in this case, we don't need any additional tools for them to perform this job, because they're just going to rely solely on the large language model to perform the job, because we're already providing the data to them. So they don't need to go out and obtain any other data. So all 3 of these models are identical, other than the fact that they're using large language models, 3 different large language models to try to accomplish their task. And then from there, we have the editor agent, which again, we're using the Llama 70B model, 70 billion model. And this editor should edit multiple game recaps and try to create the best final product. So we're going to pass in all 3 of those articles that each one of the writers created to the editor, and it's going to, excuse me, try to create the best final article given that. So we define the agents. So after defining the agents, each agent should have a task. So that's part of like the framework of using Crew AI. You first define agents, and then you give the agents a task. So now we can look at the particular task that we're going to give each one of the agents. And this is where, even going back to the beginning of this session where Miranda was talking about different prompts, this is where you can start to write different prompts, like very, very detailed prompts for these tasks. So the first one is to collect game info. And we give it a description where we can give it a pretty detailed task and prompt. Identify the correct game related to the user prompt and return the game info with using the game info tool. Now, this part is important too. Unless a specific date is provided, use the default date. So, and then use the user prompt. So we want to try to give it very specific instructions to make sure it doesn't hallucinate, to make sure it doesn't start to make up things. So this is where, as again, Miranda talked about, hey, some people didn't know, I didn't know I could prompt ChatGPT to do these type of things. You can start to get very, very specific with the prompts to try to make sure it does not give you back inaccurate information. And then we see at this task, we define which agent will perform this task. In this case, the MLB researcher. Just the same, we defined the task to go get the batting stats and the pitching stats. We said retrieve only the batting stats. So again, we're telling it specifically, only get these batting stats. And we're telling it what agent is. And now we can also give it dependencies, where it says this task is depending on the previous task being completed. So this dependencies in context. That's saying that, like, to retrieve the batting stats, we must have already completed the game info task. Just the same with the pitching stats. Give me only the pitching stats, and it must have completed the previous step, because we need that data for the correct context. Again, bear with me here. We're almost done, and we're actually going to see it run. So we need to define the game recap task. Again, we're going to have 3 different game recap tasks because we have 3 different writer agents. They're all going to be identical though, other than using a different agent. So we're saying to write a game recap with the provided info and stats. We want to include certain things like the final score, the top performer, and the winning and losing pitchers. Again, want to stress this particular bullet point. Use only the provided data and do not make up any information. So this, again, we're trying to make sure that the agents or the models do not hallucinate. Again, a very important thing, because once the models reach the edge of their knowledge, they can very confidently give you a wrong answer. So we want to make sure that we stress and put guardrails on the prompt, say like, hey, only give us things that happen from this data. Do not make any things up. So, and then we have an expected output. We have this agent, which is a llama writer, and we can see in each of these prompts, again, this is gonna be the same prompt just for 3 different writers. And then the last thing I want to point out with this is the dependencies again, is that we need to have completed the collect game info, and we need to have completed retrieving batting stats and pitching stats before we can accomplish this. Okay, again, bear with me. We're almost there. So, and the last task that we want to complete is the edit game recap. So this is where we finally pass all of that information that from those three previous tasks into the editor, and it should take all 3 of those and try to create the best article from those 3, taking parts of those 3 different ones. So again, we have a very direct, a very verbose prompt saying like pay close attention to the original instructions. Like, here are key things. Like, only use provided data. Do not make it up anything. Structure the article in this output. Give us an introduction. Give us key performers from the winning team, key performers from the losing team, and a conclusion. So we're giving it very clear instructions of how we want it to perform its task. And then we pass in the MLB editor agent. And again, these dependencies saying that it must have completed those previous tasks. All right, we're coming to the end. So again, hopefully y'all are still with me. And now what we finally do as we define all these agents, we bring them together into a crew. So with this crew, we have agents. So we define that list of all of our agents that we created. And then we have the list of all the tasks that we created. So, collect game info, collect the stats. And we want to say like, all right, we want these to run step by step. So that's bringing all that information that we defined, and that's bringing it together in a crew. So now we're finally towards the end where we want to have a user prompt where whenever we run this, it's going to ask me, which game would you like to be recapped? I'm going to type in what game I would like to be recapped, and hopefully this doesn't embarrass me and blow up in my face, and it gives us actual results. So let's try it. So to run it, we're going to say Python and then the name of the file, which is main.py. We're going to get some warnings about some stuff that's not relevant right now. So it's going to ask me, what game would you like recap? So I'm going to say, write a recap of the Braves game on August 6, 2024. All right, let's see if this works. All right, we're getting stuff. Looking promising. So what we're gonna do, like I said, since I put the verbose flag on the agents, we get to see the agents quote unquote think. So this is our first agent, right? This is our data researcher. And it's like, it literally puts out thought. I need to identify the correct game from the user prompt and return that game info. So it says that from the Braves and then August 6th. So it goes out and finds the game date, August 6th, and the team name, the Braves, and it finds what game they played on that day. And it gave us back all that relevant information. So it gave us back the game ID, the Braves were the home team, 0 runs. They got skunked that day. The Brewers were the away team, 10. So obviously the Brewers won, and they're up 1-0 in that particular series. So it's like, I think I know the final answer, and it gave us that information back. So we see that chain has finished. So that agent has finished its task. So now it can move on to the next agent to do its job. So I need to get the batting stats for the game. So in this case, it knows the game ID because the previous agent did his job and passed us the game ID. So now we can go and get the batting stats from that. So we can see now it's formatted in a table, all the different players, the position players for that game and what their batting stats were. So we see the thought is like, now I can give a great answer, and it gives us that back. So that's finished its job, its task. And then so now it did the same thing for the pitching stats, where we still got the same game ID, and it went and got all the different pitchers for that particular game. All right. So now the research portion is complete. Now we want to actually start to write articles depending on that. So now we see the thought. It's like, I understand the mistake I made earlier. I'll make sure to follow the correct format from now on. Thank you, agent, for doing your job. And so yeah, this is our first writer agent. And we see it writes a recap. The Milwaukee Brewers dominated the Atlanta Braves in the first game of the series, winning by a score of 10-0. That all sounds right. You know, given the data that we have thus far, that sounds right. That sounds accurate. Okay, so that was our first writer. So now it moved on to our next writer, where, again, if we look at the opening statement for our next writer, it said the Milwaukee Brewers dominated the Braves on the road, securing a 10-0 victory to take a 1-0 series lead in the series. A 1-0 lead in the series. It essentially said the same information, right? But it wrote it a little bit differently. You can think about, like, again, 3 different human writers can take all the same information, and what recap or paragraph they write, even though it could be the same information, it could be different verbiage, right? They could have their own different spin on it. So this is exactly what's happening with these 3 different writers. They all got the same information, but now they're writing it a little bit differently. And then if we look at our last writer, in a lopsided match, the Milwaukee Brewers triumphed over the Braves with a score of 10-0. So again, same thing. The Brewers beat the Braves 10-0. They all said the same thing, but like, again, depending on your style of writing, they each, in this case, have a different style of writing. So, because each one of these large language models has different data or a different knowledge base that it's trained on. So they all have a little bit of a different style. So now we can take all 3 of these articles and pass it to the editor. And this editor then gives us the final answer. It's like the Milwaukee Brewers dominated the Braves 10-0 in the opening game of the series, taking an early lead in the best of best of whatever series. So again, it reached the edge of its knowledge right here, right? It said best of whatever series because it didn't know how many games they're playing. It only knows about the first game. So that's one of those things, and this is a good thing to point out here. Yes, we're writing AI agents to try to automate this stuff, but you still want a human in the loop. You still want to be able to, like, as a human, to be able to look at the output and stuff, because again, these things are not perfect. Like they're advancing on a weekly basis, getting really, really good at what they do, but they're not perfect. So this is a really good example of wanting a human in the loop. And then yeah, it goes through Colin Ray earned the win, pitching 7 shutout innings, striking out 9 Braves batters, so on and so forth. So what we'll do, just as a example to try to drive it home and close it out, let's ask about the Braves games of that next day. So we asked about August the 6th. Let's ask about August the 7th. Okay, so let's see. It's starting to do its thing. So again, we see it got the date, August 7th, Braves, a different game ID. The Braves still lost, 5-8. And so it went and got all that information, used that game ID to get the stats. It's still thinking about it, taking this time. All right, so now it finished the research portion. So now we're moving into the writing portion. So we see the game recap. The Brewers edged the Braves 8-5. The Brewers took the first game of the series against the Braves, winning 8-5. Again, a mistake. Like I said, you have to human in the loop because it's actually the second game of the series. It gave us the top performers. See now, actually, this is a really good example of human in the loop, and we see how the different models can behave. Because this writer says the Brewers took the first game of the series against the Braves, winning 8-5. We know that's not true, right? Because we just looked at the game of the previous day. But this writer was more accurate. It said the Brewers took down the Braves with a score of 8-5 on Wednesday night, securing a clean sweep of the two-game series. So it accurately understood that this was the second game that they played each other, and that the Brewers won both of them. And then again, it was like in a high scoring affair, the Brewers defeated the Braves 8-5, taking a commanding 2-0 series in the league, 2-0 series lead. So again, you see they all have a little bit of a different spin on it, sometimes accurate, sometimes not. So now this is where you can, hopefully we put it into the editor and we get the most accurate response possible. So yeah, we see the editor final answer is the Brewers defeated the Braves 8-5, taking a 2-0 series lead. Again, I don't know if it was only a two-game series or if they played like a third or fourth game, but this is probably the most accurate response out of the three that the editor found, because it's like, okay, we know they're up 2-0. We're not going to make an assumption that that's the end of the series, that it was only a two-game series. It could very possibly be a third game. The editor thus far, out of the three different articles, gave us the most accurate opening statement. So I know that was a lot. I hope that was I was able to explain it pretty cleanly. So I can, excuse me, switch my screen share again. Actually, I don't even need to share the screen anymore because really, that was the last of it. So it's just Q&A now.
No worries. I like the Q&A. I like the little prompt up there. So absolutely. I think it's very fitting also for the space that you're in. So before we get into the Q&A, I just want to give a shout out to Frederick Burns in the chat, who is your assist. Okay. He's your Scottie Pippen here. And,
Well, that's my guy. No, Fred is the Michael Jordan. Like, let
you
me
hear
get
me?
Fred off. Me and Fred go way back.
He has been
That's my guy. Fred is the Michael Jordan here. So I'm the
I
Scottie
love
Pippen.
it. I love it. Well, he has been assisting and answering all the questions, pretty much anything that pops up in the chat. I do know that the Beam Path did ask earlier, can you share a list of some of the tools afterwards, or maybe email some of these tools that you were speaking of to the participants? And I'm pretty sure if you just email them to the staff at Beam Path, they can get them out to the participants for you. If you don't have access to everyone's email, they can send it out to their mailing list for people who might have missed this chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. And here's a question that just popped up also from Dr. Nashley Cephas that said, who, if you did not know, is the Michael Jordan of the Beam Path. Okay, all right.
The Michael Jordan of just AI in general, in
I
my
love it.
opinion.
Absolutely, absolutely. The way she threw up the website, we were in a meeting, and the way she said, "Yeah, I thought I'd get this website up real quick." It just made me feel so inadequate in my life. I was like, not in 15 minutes. But she said, what are some reasons you choose VS Code over the IDEs like Jupyter? I might be saying this wrong. Is it Jupyter?
Jupyter
Jupyter. Okay,
notebooks.
Jupyter Notes. It's
Yeah. So naturally, I've used VS Code for years. I typically have like my environment set up in there. So it's really just a personal choice. But I do really like using Jupyter notebooks as well. I mostly use them via Google Colab, because Jupyter notebooks are really, really cool in that you can not only put the executable code, but they're like interactive textbooks basically. So I would be happy to, put this code into a Jupyter notebook, hosted on Google Colab. Like Colab is kind of cool because you get access to a GPU for free should you need it. but yeah, like I can essentially take this project and turn it into an interactive textbook. So, and naturally, I'd be happy to do that and provide that to the Bean Path.
Beautiful. Now, Fred has a question, but I want to interject a civilian question before we get to his question.
Okay.
Okay, I have a civilian question. I have a non-techie question for, I just want to speak up for the people who might be in the chat, because I feel like we have a good mixture of people who understand code and tech. And as I was following along with the conversation, some of the questions for me, I was like, I don't even know what that question is asking, right? So, and I'm pretty sure that there are people in this chat, because a big part of the Bean Path's mission is to introduce tech to people who are all levels of tech, right? So people who have never heard of these things, who when they think about a python, they think about running from a snake in their garden. So my question to you is, based on, excuse me, what you showed me today about creating agents for AI to help me with research as a civilian, or just a regular person, how can this be applicable to my life or my business? How can I utilize this in the most basic way without the jargon of the tech space and those things?
Yeah, because again, I know I went kind of into the weeds with code, but the thing is, this is how products can be created. We can, theoretically, again, Fred is with me on this. We can theoretically take this framework and create a product out of it, where we can put a front end in front of this, and instead of me going and like coding that MLB, like that researcher agent and stuff like that, I can create an interface to say, like, if you want to create an agent, like you saw all those different fields, you just type in, you say, I want a researcher agent to go and research the latest innovations in healthcare, or I want a agent to go, and then once I research that, do the data analysis stuff. So essentially, I could generate like these agents. I did them for a very specific reason, but I could create a product around this to say, like, now you can go and create these agents in a very easy way. Now, all the stuff that you saw would still happen on the back end, but basically, I can create a website to say you type in what agent you want, it creates it on the back end, and then you would have access to those agents.
Got it. And the system that you're using for this specifically right now to create the code, to create that, what is that system called? Because again, those of us that are just kind of getting into the kiddie pool side of the AI space, we know ChatGPT. We might be familiar with some other AIs that, because when ChatGPT came up, so many other ones came up like after that, different names, and they have different functions. Some of them feel like more human-like assistants. Some of them sound more robotic. So what is this particular system that you're using to create this? And as opposed to when most people think ChatGPT, they kind of make that the general AI.
Yeah, so the programming language I am using is, I mentioned, this Python. So the framework is Crew AI. So Crew AI is what's allowing me to create those different agents and tasks. And then each one of those, excuse me, and then each one of those agents can use a different large language model. So ChatGPT itself uses like they have their different models, so like GPT 3.5, GPT 4, and so on and so forth. So we theoretically could use those as well. But yeah, so we have again, trying to think about all the layers. I guess you could say at the bottom, Python. So that's the programming language we're using. And then the next level up, we're using Crew AI. And underneath the hood with Crew AI, we're using different large language models.
Got it. It is so layered because you hear Python and you're just thinking, so many things. I remember I used to sell cell phones, and I remember some of the updates to the cell phone were like gingerbread and all these names, and you hear these things that are associated, and really just understanding that these are system names and what their functions and uses are. And so for us trying to get in, it could be a lot to take in to think about the different layers and what they do. So that's great. That's good to know. So this question says, how could the Bean Path or Miranda's organization use agents for grant opportunities? Amen. Fred might just be Jesus instead of Michael Jordan. Okay, great question. Maybe an agent that scrapes the web for new grants that fit their mission statements. Very good. I was somewhere going towards that too. Very good question.
Yeah, great question, Fred. Like, you absolutely can do that. Just like we talked about using a tool to augment it. So we were using tools to basically go and scrape data from the Major League Baseball stats website. we can write a tool, whether if there's like some repository of grants or some website that like new grants are constantly being put out there, we can write a tool to go and do that. So like we can, instead of it being like our MLB researcher, it can be our grant researcher. So let's even theoretically walk through that. We could write the tool to go in and scrape information on like new grants that are coming out. And then we can pass it to like an analyst. It's like, how well does the capabilities of the beam path map to the requirements of this grant? Like, how well do they align?
Yeah.
And we can even say, like, do the analysis of like, do we qualify for this grant? So even check like the basic qualifications. Do we qualify for this grant? Okay, then we can look at what are the requirements to apply for this grant? Like, what do we need to write? Some type of proposal? Do we need to write some type of article? In this case, I'm sure the Beam Pass already have like a repository or like a database of different grants that they've done. So they can use that as like a basis to then pass it to a grant writer agent, which will then automatically write the proposal for that grant if they qualify for it. And then they can use like the previous grants that they've written, ones that they were successful with and getting funded, and and probably use those as like a basis. And then you can pass that to the editor and say like, all right, we wrote the initial proposal, but using the context of previous grants that we got funded, now editor, take that context and edit this and try to make it an even better proposal. So you can almost automate that entire process of finding a new grant, seeing if we qualify for it, try to write a proposal to align with it, and then review it and try to make it the best proposal that we can.
Nice. And
again, you still want the human in the loop.
Right. And that's what I was about to ask, just to give your insight about, because what you start to hear for that mixed crowd of people who are jumping on the bandwagon with AI, and then you have a lot of people that are resistant, that are old school. I think about my old boss. When we started moving over into tech stuff in the studio at the radio station, he still wanted to write everything on paper, right? He was like, we were uploading everything in the computer. And so I think there's that same resistance with AI. So a lot of grant people who do resumes, they now have tools that can assess to see if you use an AI system to answer these things. So when you're thinking about creating or applying for a grant, what would be your suggestion or just your lead on how people go about that? Do they use it to answer the grant and then fill it in and go back and put it in their own words? Like, how would you suggest people go about using AI to either create resumes, apply for things, or either fill out grant applications?
Yeah, it's kind of like what I was saying earlier, is that these tools are here to stay. So how can we embrace them to improve our own workflows? So, excuse me. Yeah, I would highly recommend people doing it because it just removes a lot of manual work.
Yeah.
But one of the things is, like you said, there are different discriminator models that are trying to keep up because the advancements in the generation, in the generation is outpacing the discriminators. So the discriminator, when you have like generative AI, you have a generator model and you can have a discriminator, meaning that the discriminator tries to determine if this data was created with an AI model. Excuse me. At my job, we recently just had a meeting and they collaborate with this company. Not necessarily trying to plug them, but they just had a really cool thing called Polygraph, where it's polygraph.ai, where you can actually go and use their tool, and you can even do like a plug-in, like a Google Chrome extension, and you can plug in a website and it'll tell you how much of that website, like the copy on there, like the words, was generated with AI. And it can tell you like if it was humanized or not. So that's one of those things that you can try to do is, of course, you can generate it and stuff, but it may be very sterile. It may not be very humanized.
Yeah.
So you still want the human in the loop because, like, again, there are some tools that are, at least starting to catch up to say like, oh, this was obviously written by AI. And then sometimes you can even just eyeball it. So even with that process that we talked about to, automatically generate the grant, you probably don't just want to submit what was, came straight out of even like that whole process. You still probably want to have the human in the loop to review it, humanize the language, because again, it may be like things that, may not be relevant. We even saw in our MLB example, there was a couple inaccuracies. So you still want to check those things and try to put it into like a more humanized tone.
Very good. So we have a few tech questions from Reggie in the chat, but I want to ask before, because we're coming close where we're at our hour. And so I want to wrap up the chat for the sake of the Beam Path and them reposting and resharing this tech talk. This has been one phenomenal. I think people are highly interested in AI. They're curious about it. Some people are fearful around it, and people are really wanting to learn how to utilize it in the most responsible and best way. And so I love that. But when it comes to, I know there are a lot of free versions of different AIs. We're talking about Python here specifically for this particular workflow and research. Is Python free and available to us? Is it something that we can just go out and Google and search and grab? And so it is free and available for us to just go Google it, look up the page, and then grab it, and then we can make it do what it do.
Absolutely, it's an open source programming language, so you can, not only is it free, you can actually go and modify it if you should you want to, if you're feeling adventurous. So yeah, it's free and open source.
Awesome, awesome. And like the BeamPath, the staff said that they'll, once you send over the tools, we'll send them out via the email. So just be looking out in your email for that. So really quickly, I want to address these questions because I don't want them to be left here. It says, and I'm going to read it like a civilian, okay, like a human agent.
Okay.
As it said, if I see an LLM calling on an agent, i.e. doc underscore retrieval underscore agent, can I assume that I can assist it in any chat? And that sounds like Greek to me, which is why I know I'm a civilian.
Reggie, if you have your audio, would you mind? So I don't know if I quite understand it.
And then
Yeah,
another question Reggie had, and I don't know if this one is pertaining to that one or if Reggie is just rolling with all the questions he has. It says, how do I share chunks using RAG, R-A-G?
oh, there, Miranda Freeze. Oh, there you go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Could you hear that last question?
I couldn't. Was it the question about the RAG?
Yeah, another question he had was if that one, I don't know if it's applicable or tied to that one. How do I share chunks using RAG RAG?
I have the audio cut on. I don't know if y'all can hear me.
Reggie. Yeah, we can.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Good morning. So the real quick, I was using a Gemini advanced model, and I was giving it the prompt to. I had some things saved and stored in a folder on Workspace, and I wanted it to take those different links in Workspace and kind of categorize them, give them labels, and give me a blurb about each one of them. And so, but as it was responding to me, I was well, part of it was that I was saying, I'm going to give you 10 pieces at a time. And so after every 10 pieces, I need you to kind of, let me know that it's okay to go on or to reiterate the prompt so that I can know that you're not forgetting it. And so anyway, like towards after the seventh cycle of this, it started saying recall doc retrieval agent. And I just wanted to know that was my first time seeing that, type of, I guess, language on the screen. And so I just wanted to know if that meant that I could now say, hey, I need you to use the doc retrieval agent to recall on this information I shared like 3 conversations ago. Does that make sense?
I think so. Now I don't use Gemini a whole lot.
Okay.
I've primarily been using ChatGPT and Claude. And they do a pretty good job of maintaining the memory throughout the chat. So I necessarily haven't seen anything like that where it was trying to call an agent underneath the hood. Which I'm assuming they probably are calling agents underneath the hood, but I've never gotten a message from either of those saying that it was. That I don't know if Gemini would allow you to then actually access that agent. And even if you were, I think it would be kind of tricky because we don't know exactly what that agent is doing, like what the inputs are to that agent. So the API, the agent may not necessarily be exposed. So yeah, but again, that's me spitballing just because I've rarely used Gemini at all. So I don't have a clear answer on that.
Okay. Well, thank you. We have come to our time. Shout out to all of the people who are here participating from just, and this is the thing that I love about what the Beam Path is doing, that they're bringing all types of people on all levels of technology into a room to be able to have discussions and feel inclusive in the conversation. So thank you for speaking to each level of the group that's in here. You did a phenomenal job. How can we support you, connect to you, and just support the work that you're doing, Will.
Oh, Natalie knows me. Like we hang out here in Atlanta, and Natalie be tapping me on the shoulder. I know she's gonna put me to work, so I'm already tapped in. Even I know this is a little a tangent, personal shout out. I just want to say shout out to both my sisters that joined on the call. Hey y'all, love y'all. Appreciate y'all joining. So yeah, but no, like I'm tapped in with the Bean Path, like. Again, I'm born and raised in Mississippi. I love what National's doing with it. Even though I'm here in Atlanta, like, as I come home to Mississippi, I definitely want to try to participate more, whether it's, even while I'm here, doing it virtually or whatever. So I really love what she's doing with it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we love it too as well. Everybody's saying thank you, MJ. We're also thanking Fred in the chat. Thank you so much, Fred. Well done, MJ. And I have to keep remembering when they say MJ, they're talking to you and not me. So shout out to you. This was an amazing presentation. But tell us, how can we follow you? I know you saying you're supporting that. I love how you flip the question back on Ashley. But we're asking you, how can we support you? How can we follow you? Embrace that. How can we do that?
Yeah, so on social media, on Instagram, it's MJ Hills, spelled out EMJAY_Hill. Same thing on Twitter. And then LinkedIn, I think my ad is like William.Hill3. So, but yeah, I'm happy to share all of my social links, as I'll definitely be doing because I do have another AI talk coming up in Atlanta soon. So yeah, definitely we'll try to stay tapped in.
Very good. Well, congratulations. Thank you very much. Just as a reminder, while I'm talking, actually, Will, if you want to tap and put in your information in the chat where they can follow you on social media, people can grab that. I have a small little exit speech, and I think that'll give your fingers enough time to send out your information and for people to grab it. Can you provide the link to your organization? We would love to use your services. Oh, that's very sweet. Fred, come on, come through, Fred, with that. I will too as well. So I'll just let you know, you can follow me as well. Thank you for spelling my name correctly. So it is Miranda Joyner, Maranda Joiner. We have social media service, and Ashley gets on me every day about our organization's website that is actually about to be launched very, very soon. We're working on it in the backfield as we are currently launching other programs. We're launching an artist development program, and that has taken all of my energy in the last couple of weeks on top of my workload. But my name is Miranda Joyner. You can follow me on all platforms. Succeed and Elevate is the name of my organization. And you can find me. My particular personal website is mirandajoyner.com. So you can definitely connect to me there. That website is live and active as we work on our organization's website. I would love to connect with you there. But I want you to also, most importantly, follow the Bean Path if you aren't already. So if you aren't connected to the Bean Path social media, make sure you connect to the Bean Path social media. They are doing a wonderful work here in the community. They're doing a lot of really cool stuff coming up in the fall. They're about to launch some really cool things that's happening on a weekly basis. And they have great programs going on from kids to the elderly. They're just covering the gamut of connecting to our community. And so if you are not already connected to the Bean Path, please do that. Follow them on social media and also connect to the beanpath.org to stay connected to them. We are very excited to be partnered with them in any way, shape, or form to help bring these tech talks to life. And we're glad that you guys are on the journey with that as well. So thanks for the kind words. 6th anniversary is coming up for the Bean Path. That is a very good point. That is a notable date. So put this on your calendar, October the 21st through the 26th. The Bean Path is celebrating 6 years. So can we just take a moment in this Zoom to celebrate 6 years of being in business? Send out all the emojis, the hand claps, all of that good stuff reacting from your computer. That is an amazing feat. And actually, I just remembered again, because I remembered last year, we share the same anniversary. I've been an entrepreneur this year for 6 years as well. So 6 years, year 5, I don't know what your year 5 was like, Nashla, but mine drugged me. Okay. And I'm just glad to still be here. So really, really excited for that. I don't want to miss anything in the chats. Thank you, Bean Path, for putting my website up there. Take a moment and scroll up to the top through the comments, click on websites, make sure that you connect with Will and follow with him. Someone said that this is a great job, MJ. That was really informative and it gets the creative thoughts flowing. And then we'll put his IG and his Twitter up there as well. So I'm going to give everybody a second to scroll through the chat to connect, make some comments if you want still, but also scroll and grab people's websites and social media, and mark your calendar for the 6-year anniversary, celebrating the Beam Path, doing 6 years of business right here in the state of Mississippi, introducing this community to tech in all the places, all the ways, all the ways that they could do that. That's October the 21st through the 26th. We'll be glad to have you. We would love for you to join us as we celebrate this great organization. All right. Well, I think that is it. This has been really good, Will, and I'm going to ask AI to bring you a glass of water because you and I were having difficulties. And so maybe AI can create a glass of water, and if it delivers at your house, Nashley can probably make that happen. Nashley, go ahead and AI him a glass of water real quick.
She got it.
I got you.
All right. Dr. Cephas, would you like to say anything before we close out?
No, awesome job, y'all. Y'all did it.
Okay, sweet. All right. Well, you all have an amazing weekend. The Beam Path does the Tech Talk once a month, so make sure you follow the social media for the next date for the month of September. We'll see you in September. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Bye.